So my morning thoughts concerning relationships and relational failures, relational discourse. First and foremost, I always say this because I think it just should be made plain and clear to everyone, specifically Black people, is that our relationships have always been our relational discourse has always been at the forefront of mainstream media. Black love goes against white supremacy, right? White supremacy says Black people hate each other, Black people are violent, Black people and Black human beings, right, are actually incapable of love, right? They are monstrous, they are violent, they are, all these different things, and they are incapable of feeling, right? This is why we have the disparities within the medical research and even just medical fields in general, right? Black maternal health care and things like that, because our pain has historically been seen as something that is much of a higher tolerance than the Caucasian person. So you always have to take those things into consideration. And then when I just personally, I really, I don't know, it's so easy to do, especially being on TikTok. Honestly, I feel like you can just get lost in the algorithm, and you have thoughts and you have ideas and you have opinions and things like that. And that's okay. But I think it's really easy. I had to just delete the app today because I had to take a step back. It's really easy to jump on the conversation and start talking about Black love and relational discourse. So sometimes you have to just detox and you have to really take a step back, because I definitely think it can be very unhealthy. But something that I just want to talk about just here briefly is I truly believe that Black people are capable of love. So let's go ahead and just get that out of the air, right? Clear the air. I believe that Black love is possible. I believe that Black women are being loved. I believe that there are men who genuinely love their wives. I believe that there are relationships where there's mutual love, respect, and reciprocity, because I see it, right? I see it in my day-to-day. However, I think we've made love this easily attainable commodity, right? We believe that this is just something that happens for the everyday person. And I think because of our naivete and our immaturity, and just us being young and somewhat novice to life, we don't understand that love is rare, right? Real love is rare, and it's not something that everybody it has, and it's not something that everyone finds in their lifetime, right? I knew at such an early age that there were so many factors that really played a role in whether or not you find someone who is compatible with you and you find someone to partner with for the rest of your life and the love is harmonious, right? Some of those factors that I think contribute to this are not necessarily relational discourse or past traumas, though those things do play a role. But I actually think it's things like geographics, your geography, right? Where you live. Me being in a pretty conservative state, also dealing with just such a small town. We start talking about economics, right? You start talking about educational levels. Most people where I live, given the population, given the Black population, right? That's what I like. Okay. There's really not any education outside of high school, right? And so when you have that, you have a bunch of people who are just pretty much like adults. They're just living, they're coasting, but there's not really any growth, right? They don't really have the relational skills to actually be in a relationship with someone and to be able to communicate and to be able to love and figure out what that love is outside of, the media's poor representation of it, right? A lot of times the media really presents love as this very toxic thing, right? So you have a lot of people who never really grow out of that and who aren't able to form healthy, long-lasting, sustainable relationships. So that's one thing. But yeah, I just don't believe that women, you're not capable of love. You're not going to find anybody that loves you. I just think that we go about it in the wrong way, right? Most people won't admit it. People will never come on and talk about all the mistakes they made and why their relationships didn't work and why things didn't work, right? People kind of want to stay clear away from that, and that's fine. That's your personal business. But I definitely think it does a huge disservice to, the psychological well-being of a lot of people who, not even a lot of people. It's everybody wants love, right? So it's a huge disservice because it's people want love, people want hope, people want to be in partnership. So it's when you come out and you say these things, it's and you're being dishonest because you're not talking about all the factors that contributed to your relationship failing or you guys just growing apart, like, it's not fair, you know? So because I think we are in a society today, and just as young people, we want it now, we want it fast, we want it quick, right? And we believe that love is this thing that is just readily accessible. We believe that, to be in a relationship, all it takes is mutual agreement, right? Like, we don't consent, right? Like, we don't realize that to really have a sustainable relationship, it takes a lot of time. And that's the one thing our generation does not have, right? And when we talk about time, we're not talking about enduring abuse and craziness. No, we're talking about genuine time. And let's talk about the concept of time, right? What has happened with our time, right? We're no longer spending days at work with our coworkers, right? Sometimes we've had some relationships form from mutual work, mutual interests, right? We're no longer dedicating hours to the recreation centers, right? Like, we can work out at home, we can work out alone, right? Like, so you have to understand that that's what's really shifted, right? Love is this thing that kind of like grows. It's not something that is just like so instantaneous, right? That's lust. That's the convenience piece, right? And so when I look back on relationships and just how in the past, it was this thing to where you were able to have a long lasting relationship with someone because you saw them every day, right? And this is kind of also why it's like talking to the younger generation and people who just haven't really grown in that area, right? They don't get that, right? Like, when you're in high school, yeah, it's easy to have like a different type of relationship because you're seeing somebody every day, you're spending time every day, you're talking every day. But when you get older, there's responsibilities. There's a lot of things that kind of come into play to where you don't really have that same amount of time. Yet we're still expecting, in our minds, we're still expecting the same type of results. And it's like, that's why things aren't working, because it doesn't work that way, right? People have had experiences. People are a little bit more complex. We're adults now. We have our own interests. We have all these different things that really go into whether or not a relationship can be sustaining, right? I think the first thing, back to what I said initially, it's like, you have to realize that it's possible for you. And then I think you have to also realize that it's this rare, beautiful thing, and that it's not something that just happens for every single person. A lot of people do settle for a more convenient version of that, because to put in the time is just the one thing that people don't want to do, right? We want that result. We want to be connected to someone. We want to feel close to someone, and we try to manufacture that, but it doesn't work that way, right? And unfortunately, because the way we are living in society, right, you become an adult, you've got responsibilities and bills. We're no longer working with one another, right? We're no longer in the same cohorts, okay? So yeah, even in school, right? Like, even going to college, right? Like, so it's just completely different. It's completely different. And so I think that's what makes it extremely challenging. I really do. And I think comparatively, when we look at people who do have sustainable love and great relationships, typically they did meet in college. And I always use school and college and things like that as a reference, just because what's very evident to me is like, there's really something in meeting someone while you're young, right? Growing together, again, that time piece, the time that you guys get to spend together, throughout. It makes a huge difference in your relationships, right? Because you guys were able to really build and form a bond versus you coming out, meeting this stranger, this person's working in this field, you're working in this field, got all these other factors that come into play, like our past experiences, social conditioning, all these other things that you're up against. And now you also don't even have that foundation where you guys have really put in the time to really get to know each other, because you don't have that time. So that's the thing, right? And I think what happens with society today is because we are so used to being shortchanged, short-sighted, getting things so easily, instead of us actually taking the time to commit to build something sustainable, we want to go about getting it and attaining it in ways that are a little less articulate, right? We decide that we're going to lie, we're going to manipulate, we're going to cheat, we're going to scheme, we're going to do all these different things to get the desired outcome. And it's really just because of a lack of education. I say this all the time. I believe that people who resort to things like, bribery and, mischievousness, like all these different things, I think people who resort to manipulation, I think that they do it because they don't know how else to go about getting their needs met. They don't know how to articulate what it is that they're experiencing. Like, one thing that it's just so mind blowing to me is when you just realize how uneducated people are. And I can't stress this enough. I always say that education is enlightenment. It's a huge thing. It's a huge thing. And I always talk to you guys, like, this is not just a matter of like specialized knowledge and institutionalized learning per se, because we know that it's a specialized knowledge, right? You can be very good at, mechanics, but like there's other things in life that you need to know as well. So my hair is coming out of my little clip, but overall, yeah. So that's where we are today. Like I said, I personally don't think that it's impossible. I personally don't think that it's anything taboo. I personally don't think that, every person is like that. I just don't, because I don't think that every person is, looking for that. I think that there are people out here who are articulate, who can articulate what it is that they're wanting, who want to grow with a person, who wants to be with someone. But I just don't think, again, it happens for everybody. And I think that there are a lot of factors outside of your personal control, right? I don't think it's always a matter of like, you need to just do the work to become the person, right? Because it's like the environments, the external circumstances, the things that you can't control also are going to contribute to whether or not you're going to partner and find that rare, beautiful, blissful love, right? I think about some of the dating coaches who who are a little bit more like renowned or whatever, who aren't in any crazy scandals. But it's like, you have to understand too, like, sometimes we're in spaces and fields that we may overlook it, right? Versus like, if you have the time, let's just say you have the time, right? Because the thing is about geography as well. Yeah, you're traveling, but you're not really anywhere for a long amount of time to put down any roots to really have something sustainable. So it's like, for example, let's say you're working at this job and you actually have to go in office and you have to talk to people, you have to interact with people. And it just so happens one day you start talking to, I don't know, this technician or whatever. And it's like, you find it in the place you least expected it, right? But it's like when you're constantly on the go, you have a different type of lifestyle, you have different responsibilities, your work does not allow you to really interact with people on that level, then yeah, it's going to make all the difference. And so what we do is we try to either over spiritualize relationships today. We try to make it, this divine thing that is really not, so we have the over spiritualization of relationships. And this is really prevalent in religious and Christian communities. And I'll just say religious communities, or what we'll do is we'll just move so quickly and we'll ride on the lust and the idea of a thing. And, we just, people call it the honeymoon phase or whatever, but it's just more so like when you're getting to know someone, it's just natural. Like, it's a new job. You love it, right? You haven't met that person that's going to be sitting next to you, or, you haven't had that new update with the system to know that this is something that you're going to hate. Cause now you find out that it's going to be new updates every fourth or every quarter. You know what I mean? Like, you haven't been there long enough to really buy it and to really love it. You know what I mean? And I just think that that's the thing that we're robbed of today. I think that's why we feel so hurt and we feel so discarded, because, we're no longer putting in the time to actually get to know somebody. And it just doesn't work that way. And it's unfortunate because, like I said, you have a lot of people whose relational needs and social needs are not met. So people are going about getting those needs met in very devious and deceptive ways. You've been single, you haven't had any interaction, any physical touch, anything like that for months and years on end. You have a lot of people who are willing to, that I think socially and just even just as human beings, when you start talking about our need for touch, our need for community, our need for socialization, I think that will definitely create something very unhealthy in all of us, because it's like, we have to get these needs met, right? This is literally a foundational core need, right? We see what happens to animals, prisoners who are in solitary confinement. It never works out, right? So yeah, I think that's really what we have. But I think it's unfortunate because, again, we want everything quick. We want everything now, right? I personally think that the internet is a place where a lot of anti-intellectuals reign, because they don't really want to do the work to actually intellectualize and really conceptualize what is going on, right? They just want to come out They got money, they got, or at least the appearance of money, right? They may be in the right place environmentally, they got resources, whatever the case may be. And they want to be these talking heads. They want to be the person who has the think piece. They want to be intelligent, but they're not, right? They're not. And because they've maybe achieved some level of materialism, all of the positive aspects, right? Being intelligent, being knowledgeable is then rewarded to them. And so they really get, it's really a shortcut, and it's a serious disservice to a lot of people who listen to their content because it's extremely misinforming. But again, that's where we are, right? That's what it is. And so again, I always say this, I think it's really unfortunate, but one of the downsides about the internet is you have this huge, I guess I'll just say cohort of people who wouldn't really be in that same cohort if we were to divide it on skill, class, intelligence, right? Like, it's like you have everybody in the same grade online, and they shouldn't be. And so when there's truth that's presented, or when there's realism, or, solutions, or, genuine, I don't even want to say ideas, because it's like there's facts, right? Like about a thing, it's always, canceled out by the vast majority of people who are uneducated and who think the same way and who love to simplify very complex issues because they can't conceptualize, and they can't rationalize, and they can't think about anything else that it could be. Because to really sit and conceptualize something is to study it, it's to research it, it's to read it, it's to take time to really learn. And so we're never really progressing in that way because of the people who get on the internet and who reign, right? It's open access, it's general access, it's open to the public, right? There's no criteria to get online and misinform people. There's no criteria to call yourself a relational expert, or to call yourself a cultural columnist, there's no criteria. And I talked about this years ago. I said, what is essentially going to be the downfall of being self-proclaimed, right? What happens when we remove barriers to entry, right? What happens when we do that? And I saw this when, there was the rise of college revolt, right? Everyone was like, we're not going to college. Bump college. You don't need a college degree to be successful. This was kind of like the rise of content creation. This was like, everything was really popping off. Like, people were getting brand deals. Like, we saw it just be magnified, and it was like 10x, right? And so I was like, oh my God, right? And this is when you started having, all the life coaches, right? All the life coaches, all the dating coaches, all the business consultants. And it was like just this boom of entrepreneurship, but there were no credentials. There were no credentials. And because it was so easy to garner an audience, because there was no one to really vet you and say, well, this sucks. You don't have this. There's holes in this. It doesn't really make any sense. People were just following you. And because followers and, online success, right? Online audiences can possibly generate success, and they typically do, right? That led us to believe that, like, oh, we're successful, this is working. And this is why you have a lot of people who are online, and there's like, quite frankly, they're humiliating themselves, but because you have an audience, it's like, this is successful, right? And that's what it became about. And so it was no longer a matter of like whether or not you're actually qualified to be a business consultant or a financial expert or whatever it is that you are claiming to be. And there was no one to really critique you and back it up unless people knew you. But in that case, when people knew you and they were like, dude, you are nobody's business consultant, you were seen as a hater. You were silenced. There was no accountability there because there's already an audience and a slew of people who are believing this person. Sorry, I'm eating almonds. Who are believing this person. So, yeah, I think if you really want to do the work to talk about culture, and even still for me, man, I'm still in the back seats because, I listen to Black scholars and the way that they're able to articulate and explain things without using curse words or using offensive terminology. It's a skill. It's a skill. And it's a skill that is well deserved, right? Because they have the credentials, they have the PhDs, they have the things to back it up, you know? So here I am, and hey, we're growing, we're learning. But I can admit that. But the thing about the internet is that most people won't admit that, right? People don't tell you, like, well, yes, I was victimized in this situation, in this relationship, right? But I also went into this relationship so quickly, right? I really believed a certain type of idea. Like, I didn't understand the concept of like love and just how rare love really is. I couldn't fathom the idea of like, this doesn't happen for everyone, right? I look at people who don't have love and who don't have relationships, and I look at them as they're the problem, right? Not realizing there's so many factors that really come into play and whether or not a person is going to have a long lasting, sustainable relationship, right? And the thing is, like, there's so many factors outside of your control. But yeah, so anyway, that's the end of my video. I don't know what I'm going to call this. I'm still kind of cringing over the almond that was gross. But yeah, I hope that this was somewhat insightful. Okay, bye.